Okay, so how's everybody doing? So we're going to talk about memory and sleep support tonight. Also, anxiety can fall into that. And actually, usually I also play into this the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system actually plays quite a substantial role in memory and sleep function. But we're also dealing with an hour and a half. Usually this is a 2.5 day class. And so one of the things that I like to do with this is, right off the bat, let's start with questions that you guys have concerning this, rather than me just talking at you for the whole time. So let's start with some questions, and then we'll kind of go into some specifics, because like we spend a whole day talking about memories, we spend a whole day talking about sleep. And so let's go through and address some of the issues that you have just right off the bat. So fire away. Like what is the concern? Yes.
I would like to know a little bit more about, because my anxiety with not having a thyroid is different in the evening, whether it's medication related or not. My anxiety is different in the evening that impacts my sleep.
Okay. And do you have any pain? Like, do you have like back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain?
I have chronic pain that I manage very well.
Okay. The anxiety is actually probably related to the pain syndrome. Very, very common for anxiety to go up in the evening when you have a pain syndrome. And then it's very common also to have a sleep disorder. So basically a sleep disorder is anxiety when it comes time to go to bed, inability to fall asleep, inability to stay asleep.
The circadian function is interrupted without a thyroid. So frankincense, do you
you
have
can
a
use
cocktail?
frankincense, but what you're wanting to start to do, there's actually several steps to the sleep mechanism.
Very good.
And the flip side of sleep is also memory function. And so if you notice that when you start getting poor quality sleep, you're also, your memory function starts to go down, you start feeling
Brain fog.
Yes, and the brain fog actually comes from poor lymphatic function. So basically your brain becomes toxic. And part of the issue with the brain fog is that the lymphatic system is also acts as a delivery mechanism for some of the hormones. And so sometimes with hormones, it's not that the hormones aren't producing the hormones, you know, your glands. It's that they're not being delivered to the proper location because of stagnant lymph. And so, you know, you're going to get like body aches, you're going to get skin irritations, poor digestion, but one of the things that also happens is you start getting brain fog, the ability to process things as quickly, and all of that is tied to poor lymphatic function. One of the things that also happens with poor lymphatic function is it makes your sensory nerves fire at a much more rapid rate. And so you look at dull, achy pain, right? Dull, achy pain is basically your body is toxic. You know, that part of your body is toxic, and that achiness is your body is just not able to take out the garbage in that particular part of the body. And so if you look at things like chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, it's the sensory nerve is firing much faster than normal, and it's sending the pain impulse to the brain at a much more rapid rate. If you look at the area where there's pain, there's not a lot of swelling, there's not a lot of where the tissue's been compromised, but that nerve is firing at a much more rapid rate. So when you look at chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, it is actually a lymphatic syndrome, right? Now what happens when there's too much sensory information being pushed towards the brain, basically that turns into a brain fatigue syndrome. So if you look at chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, even PTSD, all of these are brain fatigue syndromes. Your brain just doesn't have enough blood and it doesn't have enough oxygen to process things properly. And so you can look at this a couple ways. If you just treat it as a sleep issue, you'll get some partial relief, but you actually want to do a 1-2 punch. You want to start off the morning by increasing blood flow in the morning, right? So you would use something like rosemary or peppermint right off the bat. When you wake up in the morning, you have your morning cup of coffee and you do what you would call sustained inhalation, where you hold the bottle of oil like close to your nose and you take long, slow, deep breaths, right? You're not just putting it in a diffuser, you're putting it close to the nose. And the reason being, you have 3 different ways of delivering the oils. You have one through the skin, right? Which you can get it into the bloodstream that way. You can also ingest it, right? Now, not all oils are something that you can be ingesting, but like peppermint, for example, you can ingest it, but if you ingest it right before you go to bed, for example, it loosens up the sphincter in the stomach and you're going to end up with acid reflux, right? So there's certain times where you can't take some of these oils. Now, if you do sustained inhalation, part of what's happening is those molecules that you're smelling are also part of the chemistry that's tied to that essential oil. So as you're taking long, slow, deep breaths, you're also getting those molecules into the lung tissue, and as the blood passes through the lung tissue, you're actually getting it into the bloodstream. And so it is a very safe way to deliver an essential oil, and you're also getting the energetics of the plant as well. So basically you're getting the effects like how you would do with like acupuncture. You're getting it without the needles, right? And so I would start off in the morning with rosemary or peppermint, and that would offset the morning kind of groggy feeling. Like if you're waking up super groggy and having a hard time getting going in the morning, you didn't get good sleep during the night. Like you're not getting good oxygen to the brain and you're not getting enough blood to the brain. So that's why you're feeling funky in the morning, right? Then at night you could do a couple of different oils. You could start off with just using something as simple as lavender. They've done a test where just 15 to 20 long, slow, deep breaths of lavender as you go to bed will improve your sleep function. But things like vetiver or spikenard work really super good. They're very similar to valerian, valerian that you would take as capsules. In a synthetic form of valerian in the old days was also Valium. Valium is a synthetic derivative of valerian. And so it acts as a muscle relaxer, right? And it also acts as something that would stimulate sleep function. Now, one of the things that really calms down sensory nerve function, like when your nerves are just firing too much, is there's an oil called tarragon. And tarragon's really good for calming down the nerves, and it's very good for shock. So for example, if you just injured yourself, if you just sprained your back, if you just twisted your ankle, or your boss just yelled at you, you got into an argument, if you take long, slow, deep breaths of tarragon, it actually can be very, very calming and soothing to the emotions and to the body. It does have antispasmodic properties to it, and a lot of times, for example, when you're having issues with the sprain, if you stop and inhale the tarragon, your pain will go from an 8 down to a 3 or 4 within about 5 to 10 minutes. Because you're calming down the body, you're calming down the reaction of the body, and you're calming down the emotions. And so the pain mechanisms will actually substantially calm down. Tarragon is one of the things that we use in the early stages of treatment for chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia because the sensory nerves are firing so much. Tarragon also will help you to hit all 4 levels of sleep, all the 4 cycles. Now, here's the thing when you're dealing with pain syndromes, is if you're looking at pain syndromes, you're also wanting to define the kind of pain, right? Dull achy pain is basically a type of like lymphatic stagnation, right? Your body's just, in that area, it's toxic. You know, it's poor circulation, it's poor lymphatic movement. You know, the joints are stagnant, everything is just kind of stagnant. There could be some degeneration there, it could be a muscle strain, but it's basically, it's the most common type of pain, and it's just dull, achy pain, right? Now, when you're looking at sharp stabbing pain, now you're looking at neurological pain. You're looking at the spine is compromised, one of the pathways to the nerve is compromised, or one of the cranial nerve pathways is compromised. But now when you're looking at sharp, stabbing, prickling, tingling, radiating, now you're looking at basically nerve pain. And there's a couple things that happen with nerve pain that is very different than the dull achy pain. And one of them is, in about 2 to 3 weeks, you actually develop bronchial spasms. And so with the bronchial spasms, basically what starts to happen is you start to have a short, rapid breath within 3 weeks. So basically when you have sharp stabbing pain, you're in the process of developing a respiratory issue along with the sharp stabbing pain. Now, if you look at the causes for anxiety or the causes for having a hard time falling asleep, usually when somebody has a lot of pain, they're having a hard time falling asleep because now you don't have the distractions of the day, and you're getting to have more focus on the pain syndrome, you know, whatever the pain is. You're uncomfortable, so you're laying there fidgeting around, and because of the pain, you're not able to relax and go into deep enough sleep. So part of that is if it's sharp stabbing pain, part of it is you also are dealing with bronchial spasm. So if you look at the mechanisms of what causes anxiety, there are some psychological issues that cause anxiety, but there's a lot of biological reasons, right? One of them is endocrine function, and one of them is respiratory issues. If you have a short, rapid breath, I mean, they've done studies where they can actually induce an anxiety attack and eventually a panic attack just by making the breath shallow and rapid, right? So one of the things that we use for that, and you could use this for pain syndromes, and let's do like this. Like move your body around, move your back around, and let's just play with this. You see how your back feels? And also, this sounds weird. Can I borrow your pen? This sounds weird, but take your pen and kind of push on your nail bed, like push on your nail bed. You're wanting to measure how much pressure it takes for there to start to be some sharp pain, right? You know, you kind of push down, you go, that kind of hurts, right? So just kind of measure, and we're going to do a little experiment.
Just real quick, are some of these activating like the endocannabinoid system and some of that too?
They can, yes. Actually, a lot of eucalyptuses will hit that.
So how's the tarragon working?
The tarragon just calms down the sensory nerve.
Okay.
I mean,
I like to know mechanics and physiology, so I'm gonna ask.
It hits the somatic nerves, so like it just calms down all the sensory nerves. Where there is a section, not in this class, but I'll pull up the notes on the.
I think I have notes already.
Yeah. And so, okay, here we go. So one of the oils that we use for this is hyssop. Hyssop is really good for slowing down the breath and deepening the breath. It also has something to do with muscle memory, and we're going to do an experiment, and then I'm going to explain it a little bit deeper. But this is one that you could also use to help you fall asleep at night, because it is going to slow down and deepen your breath, and it's going to relax your body. So we're going to come by, and Samantha's going to put like a drop here, like on just somewhere in your hand, and I'm going to guide you through the long, slow, deep breathing, right? So this particular hyssop comes out of Corsica. There's a bunch of different sources for hyssop.
How do you spell it?
Hyssop, HYSSOP. Yeah. And it's a very old school plant, but a lot of times it's usually English or French. But there's a Spanish, there's a Bulgarian, there's a Croatian.
And this is
This one's from Corsica.
Corsica.
Yeah.
Room smells good.
Big word.
Yeah.
This has a lavender
Now, is this one of your blends that you
No, this is a single oil.
single
Yeah,
oil?
yeah.
Because you know, like,
Yeah.
because I know at her class, Miriam was talking about some oils, and I know that like doTERRA and some of the other ones don't have some of your
Yeah, I'm
blends that
not
you make
sure.
up
Do
specific
they
for
have
your-
hyssop? Do you know?
I don't know.
I don't think they
I
do.
don't
I
think
don't,
so.
think they
Yeah.
do either.
Is
Yeah.
hyssop also effective in a cough?
Yeah, you could use it for a cough, definitely.
That's
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
thought.
Anything respiratory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now you're gonna just take some long, slow, deep breaths. Like inhale through your nose, hold your breath for a second, and then exhale through your mouth. And then again, inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. Again, inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. Inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. Maybe do it 2 more times. Okay, so just give it a second. We're going to do another cycle of it here for a second. But as you're sitting there, what do you notice? Your body feels what? Your body relaxed a little bit, right? And if you notice your mind and emotions, everything kind of calmed down a little bit, right? So part of that is your breath slowed down. I mean, bottom line, if you look at the mechanisms of what happened, your breath is slowing down, your diaphragm is releasing, which means your mind is calming down. So a lot of times the chatter that you have in your head is actually a lot of times neurological. It's not always, your mental processes chattering away. It's just your brain's overstimulated, right? So now, take a few more long, slow, deep breaths. So you notice you're already starting to get that kind of that stare where you're like, oh, I'm getting a little relaxed, I'm getting a little sleepy, right?
It's making me really lightheaded.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I got like a,
Yeah.
It
Wave.
even affected my vision for a minute. I was like,
How fast were you breathing?
just really
Now,
slow.
if you have a pain syndrome, like if you have like low back pain or shoulder pain, as you're inhaling, you can actually put your attention or your awareness on that part of your body that hurts. So let's do that. Everybody's got an ache or a pain, right? And if you don't, good for you.
Come see Dr.
But
Kendall.
right, but if you go through and then inhale it, just put your awareness on the painful spot. And as you're doing that, what do you notice? What do you notice?
I got a sensation in my head, like a sharp pain in my head, but I mean,
Did it
I
pass?
can feel my body really relaxed. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm
And
sitting,
the
I'm sitting here
painful-
going, is this real?
Right, and the painful area is changing a little bit,
Yes,
correct?
but I also am a certified chiropractic assistant working as an acupuncture assistant.
Oh, nice.
So I have a lot of alternative therapies that I do. So I mean, when I have an effect like this,
Mhm.
it's pretty neat to me.
Good, good, good.
Yeah.
So, okay, so remember we did the thing with the pen?
Yes.
Okay, take the pen and put it across your nail bed and push down, and what do you notice?
Takes more pressure.
Takes a lot more pressure, and even with more pressure, it doesn't hurt quite as bad, right? So what's happening here is you've now changed how your body is processing pain, right? It's diminished, it's basically changed your pain threshold, right? So if your body is in pain, your ability to handle more pain right now before you start to react, because threshold simply means when your body hits a certain place, that it starts to change your behavior, your thinking, right? So
Yes.
if you can change your threshold, that means it takes longer for your body to reach that place where it changes your behavior or your thought processes, right? Now, here's the thing. Like if you notice your breath, it's easier to take a longer breath and a deeper breath, right? Part of what's happening is you're relaxing your diaphragm, right? Your diaphragm is a muscle that runs across the bottom of your rib cage. And so they've been actually doing studies for the last several years in the physical therapy circles. And one of the things that we've known holistically is that whenever you relax the diaphragm, you start to relax the little muscles that go along the spine, right? They directly correspond. So when the diaphragm gets tight, the muscles that go in between the vertebrae, there's like these little finger muscles that go in between the vertebrae that allow things to move and twist and bend, they tighten up. When the diaphragm loosens up, these loosen up, right? So if you have a lot of tension in the back or you have a pain syndrome in the spine, by loosening the diaphragm, you're actually taking pressure off the spinal nerves, right? So now, remember I had you check your back. If you go through and you do this, you move your back around, what do you notice? But that still hurts, but is it a little bit more flexible? That's what we're looking for. What's that?
Not flexible.
It's not flexible. No.
So real quick, sorry to interrupt.
Uh-huh.
Because like a lot of people around here use like doTERRA and Young Living and some of these other oils. And all, as you know, all oils aren't the same quality.
Sure.
So that's like that's not an oil that's available through doTERRA. So what would be a good quality brand
So when
if you
of
wanted
the
to get it?
one of the other things that you can use if you don't have hyssop, one of the things that you can use that's very good for loosening up the spine is actually marjoram. Marjoram will, even if you put marjoram along the back, it will loosen up the muscles. You would topically put it on the spot, and so marjoram is a very good antispasmodic, and it will help either get a deeper adjustment, or will actually even help maintain the adjustment once it's happened.
But I mean, the people that might want to use it for sleep. I mean,
Oh,
that
for
would be a
hyssop.
good quality company to get that you would look at if you don't mind.
I don't know if Young Living has it.
I don't know, but Christina Sages.
There's
a
Christina,
Google source.
yeah.
Global? Okay.
Yeah, Sages Botanicals. You can go
Yeah.
on her site and you can order it from her. naturesgift.com has good stuff.
I'll be leaving a little bit back with Christy. Eventually we'll have it. It's probably in about 30 to 60 days. It'll be available because I travel all the time, so it's hard for me to fill orders. But astara.org is an organization that I'm running, and you'd be able to order off of their website, but it will still be about 30 days out. Yeah, we're in the process of rebuilding their website.
So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about the diaphragm,
Uh-huh.
of course we know the pancreas is right behind the diaphragm.
Mhm.
And you presented that it will stimulate the nerves in the spine. How does it affect the pancreas?
Hyssop doesn't really impact the pancreas too much. Oils that would really hit the pancreas would probably be like cinnamon, cassia, things like that. As far as essential oils, there are some oils that hit the pancreas, but there's probably some herbs that work better than essential oils. And so if the oils aren't like the top treatment, I usually, and there's an herb that works better, I usually go the herbal route. Like I don't stick to like, I'm gonna do it with oils. Like I kind of try to do
Right.
the best route as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Bitter melon's always a good one to use.
Hard to find.
Yeah.
Got it here.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in the
Yeah.
metabol because
Yeah.
also the black cumin
Yeah, black
and
cumin will
Gymnema.
do it.
Gymnema will actually rebuild the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans, which makes your insulin.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
What does it?
Gymnema. We use it. It anesthetizes you. So we have people that
Right.
that they really like. I have to have sugar.
Right.
You can actually suck on Gymnema. It'll anesthetize your tongue, but also when you ingest it, it'll anesthetize your sugar sensory in your gut, so you won't like the sugar. So it's kind of a cool test that we do.
Wow.
You can take liquid Gymnema, swish around their mouth, and then you give them a piece of chocolate, and it tastes like.
Really?
Yeah. So like the new metabol and metabols.
So it's like that stuff you give dogs so they don't eat their own food.
You know why dogs do that?
Corporophagia?
Because they're
I think
dogs.
it's because they're Yeah. So it's the same idea. You give us a sugar thing, and then when we.
I used to joke. I was like, my first million will be cat poop flavored dog treats. Yeah. So.
I have a question. When you were
Yeah.
talking about the lung transfusion of blood and the carrying over of the the essential oils into the bloodstream, is there a threshold? Sorry to use that word, for how many breaths or like how?
A lot of
long
times
you do it
what will
for?
start to happen is as you start to kind of reach your threshold, you'll notice that you're not breathing as much, or you'll stop kind of
But
breathing.
it's not like
a lot.
5 deep breaths will.
No, it's different for each person,
Really?
and as you kind of treat it at first, it might only be 5 or 10. Oh, thank you.
Yes, we use
5 or 10, but then after a while, it might be 20, 25.
So the more
And-
you.
Yeah,
Or you do
and
it-
so like if you're having a hard time falling asleep, for example, you can lay down with hyssop and start taking long, slow, deep breaths. And usually within about 15 or 20 breaths, you're falling kind of asleep. Marjoram would do the same thing. Marjoram's actually very good for insomnia. You just take long, slow, deep breaths. It loosens up the spine.
So you're saying
So-
it's oil
so it's-
dependent on how fast it gets into the
Yeah,
bloodstream. Okay.
let's my marjoram probably smells different than his, but marjoram is marjoram. So we'll come around and we'll use.
Oh, you have okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
It smells like
Marjoram's a really interesting oil, and I would say like if you have like a kid where if you had a kid where you only had like maybe
Give it a minute, it'll start to evaporate. If you kind of fan it. Oh,
We may RJO or
like if you had a kid where you only had like 10 or 12 oils, I would say marjoram should make the cut. And for several reasons. I mean, for one, you're coming to a chiropractor, so you're going to get spinal support from the use of marjoram. You could take a salt bath in marjoram will help to loosen up the back. Just putting it on topically will help do it. if you, for example, like in the middle of the night, if you start to get a cramp in your leg, like say you get a cramp in your calf, you don't even have to get it on the spot. You could put it on your thigh, and it will take the cramp out in almost like 5 to 10 seconds.
Really?
Yeah, like so you have it by your bed and just, you know,
Price of margarine
boom.
just went up.
Yeah. So it is a really super good antispasmodic, right? So now, one of the other things is that it's very good for relaxing. It's very good for insomnia. It's very good to help induce sleep. Again, it's loosening up the back. It's loosening up the muscles. One of the things that you're trying to target when you're trying to fall asleep is you're trying to reduce muscle activity, right? That's part of your sleep mechanism. That's part of you falling asleep is your muscles become less active. Now, that's not just skeletal muscle, that's also the digestive tract. You know, you want the digestive tract or the smooth muscle to calm down. And so marjoram actually helps take the tension out of skeletal muscle, and it helps take the tension out of the smooth muscle, and it helps take tension out of the cardiac muscle, right? And so by doing that, you're starting to hit the targets that move you into getting deeper sleep, right? Now, on a deeper level, if you start looking at it from a psychological point of view, is marjoram also helps with the grieving process, right? The grieving process. Now, when we think of grief, we think of the loss of a loved one, the loss of a friend, something like this. But if you boil down what is grief, like if you look at what is the mechanisms of grief is basically processing some sort of trauma, or another way of saying that is you're having a change of perception, right? Something during the day is you've had to change your perception and you're grieving that loss. And so if you think about what is trauma, it is you have been forced to change your perception. And if you think about the things that happen during the day, the things with social media, the things with going on, whatever, and politics, with your friends, with your family, with work, with relationships, you're constantly having to deal with some sort of change some sort of change with your perceptions of things that are going on in the world, right? Your ability to be more fluid with that change directly corresponds to your ability to relax and your ability to not be as traumatized. Part of anxiety psychologically comes from your ability to manage trauma, right? So trauma is, when you again boil it down, is basically being forced to have a change of perception, right? So like we've known each other for X amount of years, we've been good friends and everything, and then all of a sudden I go off on her about something about politics, right? So, you know, some goofy thing. We're having some goofy conversation, right? So she's traumatized from the argument, but then there is, she thought we were better friends. She thought that our friendship was more important than a silly opinion about politics, right? She thought I was a different person than the person who went off on her like that, right? All these things now have changed because of this one incident. So now there's not only the argument or me going off on her, but there's the change of all these different perceptions that she is going to have to grieve now, because there's no going back from that. There's no unringing that bell, right? So your ability to be more fluid with that depends on how able you are to adjust and adapt to the things going on in your environment. Now, trauma gets stuck in your spine, right? When you look at mental faculties, part of your mental faculties, this is starting to go into esoteric teachings, part of your mental faculties is actually tied to spinal cord function, right? So this is why psychosomatic issues are such a thing. Psychosomatic issues are basically where the body and brain function are mixing is in the spinal cord, right? And so a lot of spinal health directly corresponds to your mental faculties. And so when you're starting to release something very deep from the psyche, part of where it's coming from is it's actually coming from the spinal cord. And if you look at how you're interacting with the environment, is you're constantly projecting something into the environment, you know, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, but you could also, there's a kind of energy that you're putting out, right? And then you're taking energy from the environment and you're trying to get it in and processing it, right? So part of how that's happening is you're projecting from the spinal cord, and you're taking the information in and you're getting it to the spinal cord so it goes up into the brain, right? So your soft tissue or your fascia is what gives your body its shape, holds organs in place, wraps around the nerves, wraps around blood, wraps around all the bones, wraps around groups of muscles. But part of its mechanism is it moves things away from the spinal cord and it moves things to the spinal cord, right? So marjoram actually helps the mechanisms that move the energy from and to the spinal cord. So if you look at what does that mean down deep, it means your ability to adjust and adapt to your environment is heightened when this tissue is loosened up and relaxed, right? So there is a psychological benefit to this. There is a physical benefit to this. You know, you physically feel better, your spine feels better, but psychologically you're able to adjust and adapt better, and you're able to roll with things a lot easier rather than getting traumatized and stuck on something when your feelings have gotten hurt, or you have a hard time getting over something where your perceptions have changed. So this one single oil does quite a bit, and it's not very expensive, right? It takes the spasms out, it does all these things. So if you had this is a go-to one for your kid, you could use it in a pain kit, you could use it for psychological healing, you could use it for sleep mechanisms, you could use it for lymphatic function, you could use it for the grieving process, you know, getting over hurt feelings. There's so many things that you could use this for. It's actually very activating to the heart, so you can actually even use it for relationship healing. There's so many things that this could be used for, that it is just kind of a good go-to oil that has a lot of uses.
I'll take a gallon.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite oil that you like to add to it, or do you
Like
you
a
like
carrier
it
oil?
single?
No, I would. You could use any kind of carrier oil that you'd like.
All right, yeah.
You know, the kind of the new one on the market is coconut oil.
Okay, yeah.
Almond oil works
Yeah,
really
yeah.
good.
Okay, yeah.
You know,
Jojoba oil was the thing
yeah,
today, right?
jojoba
Right,
works.
yeah.
So,
Okay, good.
so depending on your whatever you're trying to change,
Mm.
does it the mechanism, like how you deliver it, change with
Yeah,
it? So like
so-
if I'm like muscle pain, maybe topically, but if it's like emotional, would you
Yeah,
go back to the
so-
breathing or?
With muscle pain, so like let's do this. If you don't mind, like roll up your sleeve. We're gonna do another experiment, and we'll use the marjoram for this. So I mean, because he brings up a very good point. Let's do the experiment, and then I'll explain the different applications. Okay. So what I want you to do is move your wrists around, move your forearms around, and just see how this feels. And you're gonna roll them up because we're gonna apply oils to one of your arms. So just notice, okay, notice how everything feels. Now, she's going to come around, she's going to put a drop on your wrist, on your elbow, and a couple on your forearm, on just one side. We're just going to do your left arm, and then we'll do the experiment, okay? So hold out your left arm.
And which oil is this?
It's still the marjoram, it's the
Okay.
one that we just had.
Are we gonna need a dry pump?
Yeah.
Over. Yeah.
So, if you were doing like a foot soak, say,
Uh-huh. Oh, this
You
would
put
be
a
great
few-
for a food.
I've already wrote it down, I thought so.
Yeah, especially if you're prone to cramping. You know, even you know how you get the trigger finger. It's not the only thing that would work for trigger finger, because you're getting a spasm, but you're also getting little crystalline deposits on the tendon. It doesn't remove the crystalline deposits. You would use like forms of eucalyptus to do that, but it definitely would take the tension. twitching eye, that's probably, I would probably rub it on the neck, because a lot of times that's probably a bone out of place in the upper part of the neck.
That would be you. I have to come see you.
Okay, so everybody has the oil on their left part of their arm, right? Now compare your two arms. Okay, you have a favorite arm right now, don't you?
This one feels heavier.
Right, the left or the one with the oil. Like you notice it moves a little bit easier. You notice that it bends a little bit more.
Not here.
Not here. What's happening for yours?
I'm sorry?
What's happening with yours?
Well, I've had this thing that he's working on. The pinky, this one and that one, I thought it was neuropathy, but
It's a
not.
neurological. It's an ulnar nerve.
And
Oh.
it's there, but this one is still heavy, and
Right.
this one is like light as a feather. I'm like
Right.
fine, but this one is.
But that one's it's compromised. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay.
An application on the neck.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Neck or even
Yeah, that
shoulder.
neck or shoulder.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's not
So,
the answer
okay,
you
so-
wanted.
No, it's good. It's a good learning experience to like
Yeah.
change it to a different
So
position.
now you go through and you move the two around, and one feels lighter than the other, right? It feels a little bit easier. And if you notice the other one, except for him with the compromised arm, right? The one that didn't get the oil feels a little heavier. It feels like a little low grade achy, right? You notice that?
Feels left out.
Yeah, it feels left out. Feels like the stepchild. It feels right now. Your other arm was feeling that way before, but now you have something to compare it to, right? Now, the thing that you just did is you got the chemistry into that side of the arm, but there's also an energetic aspect, a lot like you would do with acupuncture, right? And so this aspect you can actually direct with the scent, right? So what you're going to do is the oil that was on your left arm, you're going to start inhaling it, and you're going to put your attention on the right shoulder, right? Just like you're aware of your hand moving like this, but you're not looking at it, you're going to put your attention on your shoulder just as you inhale. You don't have to visualize anything. Your attention is just right here on your shoulder as you take long, slow, deep breaths. Okay, and keep inhaling, but now your awareness is on your upper arm. So the front and the back of your upper arm, from the shoulder girdle down to the elbow. You're taking long, slow, deep breaths. And then the elbow itself, the front, the sides, the back. And then the elbow. excuse me, I said elbow, meant wrist. And then the whole hand. Okay, so now compare the two arms. What do you notice? The right
Very
one,
even.
the right one, even though you didn't put the oil directly on it, it actually still did something, right? So here you're not directing the chemistry, but you're directing the energetic aspect of the plant. Just like you would with acupuncture, you're working the energy or the life force in the body. The same thing is happening here, but you're directing the life force of that plant, right? So again, you're not directing the chemistry, you're just directing the energetic aspect, right? So now, when you're looking at different types of applications, you can inhale and put your attention on that particular part of the body, right? Part of how you would direct it through the chemistry or the physical aspect is you would look at the symptoms and go, okay, this oil works good for this, right? But one of the ways that you would work it energetically is you would inhale it and then direct it to that body part, right? So that's one. Then when you start putting it on the skin, when you put it in what you would call a neat application, that is, it's mixed with nothing. You're putting it directly on the skin. It's passing through the skin and getting to the area and then eventually hitting the bloodstream. Now, if you wanted to go deeper, right, you would make it into a liniment, which means you would make it into something that's alcohol based or witch hazel based or like vinegar based, right? It works as a solvent and takes it deeper, closer to the bone at a much faster rate, right? Now, when you want to have it linger in a particular area, then you would mix it with a fatty oil, right? You would mix it with a fatty oil. So if you took like coconut oil or almond oil or olive oil, jojoba, whatever you would take it with, and you would put essential oils in it. Essential oil is a volatile oil, right? It basically volatile means that when it's exposed to air, it starts to break down, and that's how you're getting the scent, right? Then you have the fatty oil, and when you mix the two, they're kind of like oil and vinegar, where they're going to eventually separate, right? So when you put it on a particular area, the carrier oil is not carrying it through the wall of the skin, it's actually separating, and the volatile oil is separating and penetrating at a much slower rate. So it's basically, when you put it on as an ointment or a massage oil, it's like a time-released capsule that you're putting directly into that area, right? So if you want it to be slowly released into a joint, you would mix it with a carrier oil, rub it into that area, and then little by little, it continually releases into that joint, right? Yeah. So if you're wanting to hit the bloodstream, you would just put it in a neat application or alcohol. If you're wanting it to be a slower released, where say you're treating arthritis, you'd want to put it in an ointment base because you're wanting the oil to stay in that particular area for a longer period of time. Now, if you're treating, like he was talking about his shoulder, where it's radiating up the arm, or it's most likely coming from his shoulder girdle or his neck all the way down into his fingers, hitting the tissue, but also having to go up the bloodstream and up the arm a little bit is actually more beneficial than just putting it on a localized spot. So he would do either a liniment or a neat application to try to unwind that particular issue. So the application is dependent on what you're trying to treat. If you're not sure, it's always easier to put it like in a massage oil and rub it into an area, right? If you're just not sure. Another good way to treat something is, if you're not sure, put 10, 12 drops in a salt bath and soak in a salt bath. You know, half a pound or a pound of salt. It's very relaxing. You can use Epsom salt to take some of the tension out of the body, and then soak in the bath. As long as it's not a really hot oil, like you wouldn't want to take a cinnamon bath, for example, or an oregano bath. You know, it would be irritating to the skin. But like if you wanted to do marjoram or hyssop or vetiver or spikenard, very, very relaxing, very, very soothing.
I got a question. Because one of our participants does a lot of emotional healing work.
Uh-huh.
And so you said it helps with like emotional loss and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
So if I did the oil, would I do a breathing, and would you actually think about the emotional trauma?
You could, yeah.
Would it,
like
or
if
do you just generally, or would you? Is it
you
more?
could-
Is it better if you think of the emotional trauma that you're dealing
You
with?
could definitely think of the trauma. Like, so one of the ways that you could deal with it is
Let's say you guys had a fight, so you would take the oil.
right. So you could inhale it, just inhale it. That would be one level. If there was an emotional component, you would sit and you would hold that issue with your awareness on the heart, and then inhale it. Right. So that would help you to kind of integrate it, and the heart also has a transmuting effect. So it would help you to like integrate it, move past it, and move on. Right. Now, if it's a repeated thought process that you're having a hard time letting go of, then you could think about it as you're thinking about it. There are certain oils that you could use to break things down. So oils that are really good for that are cypress works really good for that. Any sort of eucalyptus works really good for breaking down repeated thought forms, repeated thought patterns. And then any of the grasses, like lemongrass, ginger grass, camel grass, bluegrass, African bluegrass. I don't know if I have any.
Now you'll be carrying the African bluegrass, won't you? On your,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because doTERRA doesn't have it. That's the
Yeah,
one that we were looking for the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't have.
Yeah.
Over, other area there. Lemongrass, it's in a bigger,
If you need lemongrass, we got some.
it's across the back.
There is a bluegrass in
No,
there?
lemongrass, no, not bluegrass.
Gotta love technology.
If you want to use that.
Okay. So with lemongrass is one that a lot of times you don't want to put directly on the skin because it could possibly irritate the skin a little bit. Let's see if I have. If you put it in a carrier oil, it would not. Let's do this. We could do it with basil. Think of something that you have a repeated thought, like where when you think about it, you can't really break it down very much. Like as soon as you start thinking about it, it's like, okay, I start playing that tape again. I can't break out of that tape, right? I can't break off the repeat button, right? Now, we can put this on your skin. If you don't want to put it on your skin, what you could also do is just take a little piece of paper and we dab it on a piece of paper, and you can smell it this way. But here we'll use basil, and that should be something that doTERRA has.
Yes.
You get it? Right here?
Or anywhere on that arm.
Okay. Oh, higher up part, yes. Okay.
Okay, so now, one of the things like he was saying is you can be thinking of the actual issue, think of the repeated thought pattern, and as you're thinking about it, just take long, slow, deep breaths. What do you notice as you're taking a long, slow, deep breaths to that thought pattern? What do you notice?
I kept losing my thought pattern.
Exactly. Like it
Yes.
starts to be harder and harder to hold on to it,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
And so part of what's happening here is a lot of times what's happening, and this actually plays into the memory mechanism, is you're dealing with a repeated pattern that is actually most likely that was a neurological pattern. It was not something that you were like mentally engaging. And so one of the things that you can look at is you really have a couple of different kinds of thinking. You're basically, you have your brain is neurological, but how you think is actually your endocrine system and your mental body or your mind functioning through the brain, right? So you have kind of brain thinking, and then you have thinking that's associated with the mind, which is when the mind comes in, the brain calms down. All the chattering kind of stops. So basically the nervous system calms down, right? And so when you're dealing with some of these things, the thing is you're wanting to basically re-educate certain aspects of the nervous system. And what happens is we have these exposures, we have these events that have happened to our lives where certain things have happened to us that has impacted our neurology, but it's not content driven. It's not like you have to go through and process this particular event to let go of this issue. It's basically like a light switch got flicked. It's either agitated or it's not. And if you look at how nerves function in the body, there's this thing called the righting reflex. And so basically your body is always trying to maintain some form of homeostasis. So if your shoulder goes up, you don't walk around like this all the time because your body says like, hey, I need to have my eyes horizontal with the ground, otherwise it's going to be hard to function and survive in the normal everyday world. So your head adjusts like this so your eyes can stay horizontal. Well, 30 days goes by and you start to try to put that shoulder back and the body is like, no, I got this. I've made the adjustment. I've done the paperwork. This is the new us. We're not going to go back to that old, we've got this. I'm managing this, right? And so you try to push that back and the body has not judged it as good or bad. It's just like, this is the new us, right? And so putting that shoulder back actually causes the body stress. Your body actually resists that. That's why you have to have repeated sessions with like chiropractic or massage or whatever, is you're having to re-educate the body, right? And so after a period of time, then the body goes, okay, we've done the paperwork, we'll go back to the way it was before, right? So there are these mechanisms in your brain where the same thing happens, where you have these mechanisms in your brain function where when it fires down a particular nervous pathway, then it's just going to get stuck and then it's not going to undo itself. Like you have to go through and re-educate it, right? And so there's this thing called episodic memory recall. And episodic memory recall is that you can recall a very specific event, the time, the day, the event, the colors, the tastes. You can recall tons of details because it was a very impactful memory. So like if you say, okay, 25th birthday, 21st birthday, 16th birthday, something where it's very specific. It's not like, oh, there was this thing that happened when I was in 8th grade. It's something very, very specific. Or when I was young, this used to happen all the time. We're not talking about that. We're talking about in a specific event, right? So part of why this is important is this is one of those things that can get agitated and actually can start to impact you psychologically. Because what happens is your brain is always trying to predict the future. It's always trying to maintain balance in your body and maintain balance with the environment, right? So another way of saying that is it's trying to stay comfortable and prevent pain, right? So your brain's always trying to go, okay, based on past experiences, what do I predict that is potentially going to happen, right? I don't want this painful thing to happen again, right? So part of episodic memory recall is your brain is trying to be certain of what's happened based on the past and is like, okay, this is potentially a thing that's going to happen. Let's try to prevent it, right? So the more certain your brain is, the more you're living in the past. The more you start to be a little bit uncertain, you're more likely to be in something new or something different because your brain is in that state of where it's going to reboot, right? So when you're like, I'm not sure what's going to happen here, that's perfect because now your brain is in this spot where it's like something new can happen, something different can happen, right? So for that to happen, you have to reboot this episodic memory recall. It's a lot like turning your computer on and off. Like if you go through and you turn your computer off, all the programs stop running and then you turn it back on again and your computer starts working better, right? The same thing happens with the brain. It's holding on to this particular event, and when you go and you kind of flick it off and flick it on again, it basically lets go of whatever this event is and allows that to dissipate and go away. So why is this important? When you've had a traumatic event, the stronger the emotion, the stronger the impact, the stronger the pain, the more likely your brain is going to hold on to this particular event, right? So at some point, you go through and you do whatever emotional processing, you do whatever mental processing, you get it out of muscle memory, you get it all out of your body, right? Your brain goes, don't worry about it, I'll never forget. I'll never let go of this, right? So you go through and you're trying to unwind this part of the trauma from the past, but part of your brain is going, don't worry, you can forget about it all you want, I'll never forget, right? I'll never let this go. So what happens is you keep repeating this pattern and you keep grinding on it because part of your neurology is, I never want to experience that again. I never want to touch that hot stove again. I never want to have that pain again, right? But a lot of time it is a one-time thing. It's not like you're doing it over and over again, right? So like a car accident's a perfect example. It's not like you're getting into a car accident every week, right? It is hopefully a one-time thing, or maybe twice in your lifetime you got into a decent car accident. So you have to be able to let it go, right? And so by going through and doing this, you're basically letting it go for a second and then letting it reboot, because you're not going to make that mechanism go away, but you want to reboot it, right? You just want to reboot what it is so that you can let it go. So let's do this. Let's take it a little bit farther and go through and stop talking about it. Let's experience it. We have to direct it through different parts of our body to go through and do this, but here you don't have to visualize anything. You just run it through the different mechanisms. So it's tied to like meridians and energy system and neural pathways. And the thing is, you don't even have to understand why it's doing what it's doing, but if you follow the sequence, it does it. So let's do this. Think of something Think of something where there was some pain from your past, something that you've tried to let go of. It could be, you know, some situation that happened at work, somebody hurt your feelings, there was a car accident, something that when you think about it, you feel the pain of it or you shut down, like you just go numb when you think of it. You like, I can't even go there, right? That usually means there was a lot of pain there, right? So the thing here is you're not going to have to process it. You're not going to have to relive it. You're not going to have to go through and go, oh, I have to go through these steps again. You're basically going to reboot it and just watch it float away. That's it. You don't have to go through and relive anything, right? When you take the garbage out, you don't have to go through and relive all the food that you ate all week. You just take the garbage out, right? This is the equivalent of you just taking the garbage out. You know, you don't have to relive it, right? So think of something from your past. Could be last week, last month, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it does not matter. Something where you can go back and think about it and it has some sort of emotional charge. You're not going to have to talk about it. You're not going to have to share it. But we want to just actually measure it. If you do this, it does it no matter what. But we want to have you measure something right now, right? So just think of something from the past. If you want to jot yourself down a little note, like it makes me feel shut down, it makes me painful, it makes me triggered, it makes me sad, it makes me whatever. Just think about it for a second. I mean, everybody has something. Even the Dalai Lama or the Pope has something. Okay, so now we're going to use a different oil just for the sake of exposing you to a couple of different things. And this one's in the frankincense family, but it's called Palo Santo. And so
Spell that.
Palo and then Santo. And so very good for anxiety, by the way. Very good for sleep, also good for pain management. You know, it's not a pain reliever by itself, but because of what it does reduce pain. And it's very good for anxiety. And actually, I use it to even treat OCD. I usually give a person with OCD a couple of drops a day that they put in water and they drink it. And the symptoms of the OCD go down anywhere from 30 to 70% if they do it on a daily basis. Which is, I mean, it doesn't cure it, but it greatly reduces it, the symptoms.
Can I get technical again? Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So does it because you know the memory part is the amygdala that you're activating,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of times the amygdala can't get rid of it because of dopamine. So does it indicate like this upregulate your dopamine levels, or does it make your dopamine receptor sites more?
I think it makes the receptor sites
more active to the dopamine.
Yeah, I don't think
longer.
I don't think it changes the dopamine. I think it actually hits the receptor sites.
The receptors.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Sorry,
We're going to. There's a company that is out of California where we're actually going to start testing a lot of these things, and they do a lot of the testing on brain scans and brainwave activity and things like that. And we're going to start running a lot of the oils through this so that we get like scientific information that's just like
Sure, you're down.
I'm actually, I'm gonna make it available to the general public. I'm not gonna like
I mean,
sit on
certainly
it.
you're wrong
Yeah,
at it.
yeah. What's that?
I said, share me your wrong.
Yeah, I'm glad to.
Because I'm getting ready to do a video on HPA axis and how it affects the amygdala.
Right. Oh,
With
nice.
Stress and
Right,
cortisol and downregulating
Right.
the dopamine and the amygdala. Just so when you get stuck in that
Right.
traumatic
Nice.
event.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how they can measure that on that machine. I mean, and basically we could just present them with a problem and they come up with the way to measure it. Because they have like 4 different devices that they're using to measure.
Okay.
2 are FDA approved and 2 are just, funky machines. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, again, you can put it on a piece of paper or,
Yeah, if you here,
Or if you put something.
here we can do.
so this is a
Someone's tired of putting
wood,
it on.
this is a wood that comes out of Central and South America.
If there's
Oh, yeah,
It's,
that's
it's
it.
in, the frankincense,
I gave you some share.
I'll have the,
the Palo Santo.
I'll have the Palo Santo and hold the cheese.
You just like that.
It reminds me of. Let's try it somewhere in here.
Where your nose can still reach.
If they get tired of
Yeah.
putting them on, they lose their
Want me to put on the paper for you? I have a tissue up there. This is called Palo Santo.
So this is gonna be a little bit different where we're actually gonna guide it through a sequence through the body.
You want that?
While we're getting ready for that, have you had a lot of people had allergic reactions when they started
Yeah.
this year?
No, there's only been a couple,
I'm not being like a,
No, no.
I just wondered if you've
Yeah.
ever had
Yeah,
anyone
so-
have anaphylactic.
there was, never
never
that bad.
Never.
A lot of times they'll get like a little bit of a skin reaction. There was one where they had a respiratory issue, but it was on the milder side, and that one was cedar. Like in Texas, there's a lot of cedar allergies.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And they call them cedar, but it's more juniper than cedar, but they, for some reason, call them cedar.
Oh, did? Here, let me see something. YouTube, what do you expect? Or you mean the thing shuts down?
Yeah, so like it ended the video and then it wouldn't let me start a new one.
Okay, so you're gonna inhale, but your awareness is up here on the top part of your throat. You're just gonna take long, slow, deep breaths. And this is gonna make you probably a little bit mellow or sleepy or whatever, but let's just see what this does. You've checked in with the old event, right? And we're just gonna see what happens. So you're taking long, slow, deep breaths. Your awareness is on your throat. And now you're going to drop down to the bottom part of your throat. That little notch, that little sternal notch right there. And then if you go opposite here on the back side, the back part of your throat, long, slow, deep breaths. Now you're going to your jaws, like right where they hinge, right in front of the ear canals. Keep your awareness on your jaws. Keep taking long, slow, deep breaths. And now move to your temples. Keep it on your temples. Long, slow, deep breath. Now go to the area opposite your eyebrows on the back side of your head. So you're taking long, slow, deep breaths with the back side of your head. And then to the area of your forehead. Okay, keep your eyes closed and just be still. You can let everything go. Just keep your eyes closed for a second, just let it incubate. Christoph, how do you feel?
Chill.
You feel very relaxed, right? So you think about if you had anxiety, it diminished probably somewhat right now, right? So go back to the event that we were talking about. Remember the one that you could specifically recall? Go back and recall that right now and just see what you notice. Hard to do, isn't it? Like when you go back, like if you can see like where I'm sitting, everybody's like going.
It's hard to pull the detail, you know.
You know, it's like you're looking for it, but it's like trying to pick sand up with your fingers open. Like even if you can grab onto it, you can't hold onto it for very long because it keeps falling through your fingertips, right? And so part of the memory mechanism, if you think about it, think of it like when your computer has too many programs up and running. Sometimes your brain, the memory mechanisms aren't functioning because you have too much agitation up in the mechanisms of just past exposures. And if you go through and you re-educate this part of the memory mechanisms, a lot of times memory improves, right? So memory can be increase of oxygen and blood to the brain, but sometimes it's that you're not even able to pay attention to how the memories got formed in the first place because there's so much going on that you're so distracted that you didn't even take in the information to begin with. There's nothing to recall because you didn't really get to process it in the first place. Does that make sense? And so basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to quiet down the mind and turn on the observer, right? If you can sit and start to observe things, for one, your mind's quieter, it becomes easier to fall asleep, and you're observing more information so that now you have something to recall. Where before you really didn't have enough to recall because you weren't able to be very present with what was happening because you have so much going on from these past exposures that you have these little programs that are running that you're not choosing, they're just running. Right? It's like you have a bunch of programs running in the background that you're not aware of that's eating up all your data. Like you only have so much operating data and a bunch of it's getting used for things you're not even aware of, right? And so you're basically trying to quiet down those aspects so that you're choosing how you use your conscious awareness. You're choosing how you're using your memory. You're choosing, like, this is the time that I'm going to relax and go to sleep rather than my mind just gets exhausted and I can finally fall asleep, right? Because a lot of times that's how we fall asleep, is just exhaustion, right? But if it's the end of the day and you're not exhausted, if that's the only way you can fall asleep is exhaustion, then you keep pushing yourself until you're exhausted. You just don't go, I'm going to have an easy day today and then I'm going to go to bed, right? Sometimes as we get older, that becomes harder and harder to do, and it's just these exposures over a period of time. So if you look at it, there's certain systems in your body that has a memory, right? Your endocrine system has a memory, your nervous system has a memory, your immune system has a memory. So we want to be able to basically re-educate those memories so that your past exposures don't become the thing that's holding you hostage in the here and now. Because if you look at what is an allergy, it's exposures to things in the past for your immune system. If you look at some of how we emotionally learn or we get triggered by certain things, it's how we get exposed to certain things in our nervous system, right? Our endocrine system is the hardest cycle to break because it's a slow communicator, right? It communicates slowly, which means it breaks the pattern slowly, right? So if something's in motion in the endocrine system, it's a hard one to unwind because it takes so long to unwind it. Kind of interesting, yeah? So I know we kind of bounced around a little bit. Let's still answer some questions that you guys have, because I could go on tangents all night long, but let's make it specific to, we still have a little bit of time, so fire away. Yes.
I have thyroid issues too, but it's the
Yeah, what is it?
thyroid issues.
Thyroid,
I have-
okay. Mm-hmm.
Right now I lost the word.
Hypo?
Well, not
Hyper-
hypo, but
Hashimoto's
Okay.
how, in my doctor, I mentioned, because my daughter sells the doTERRA.
Right.
I had
So one of the things that you can do with when you're trying to treat something that's like that, you're wanting to, even though it's an endocrine issue, you're also wanting to reboot the immune system, because part of that is an autoimmune mechanism, right? And so there's this thing that happens in your sleep called, you want to hit this target, it's called the anabolic state. The anabolic state. And so basically, you're either, in your sleep, you're either regenerating or you're degenerating. If you're not hitting this target in your sleep, then you are degenerating, right? So it would be a catabolic state, right? And so in this anabolic state, your immune system, your nervous system, your endocrine system, and the muscular system all reboot, right? And so anytime you're having issues in that, one of the things that you would want to use to reboot that is one of the easiest and the best ways without having to use like fancy blends and everything is ginger. And you would think of ginger as being kind of stimulating, but it is a stimulant, but to certain processes of the body, right? It has, in the Ayurvedic medicine, it talks about how there are certain herbs that help with certain rhythms or certain functions in the body. And ginger is very good for some of these rhythms that happen, especially in the nervous system and in the brain. And one of the best things to push you into that anabolic state is actually the use of ginger. And you can take it internally, but actually even just inhaling it, like right before you go to bed, it doesn't seem like it would be relaxing, but it's actually deeply relaxing, because when your body is stronger, your body actually relaxes, right? So one of the ways that we look at, it's not in the sleep class, it's in this other class, that talks about dealing with like trauma where there's been some event that's happened, right? So like say you were in a car accident or in a traumatic event where there was like a shooting or a bombing. We were looking at it for PTSD type issues, right? And one of the things that happens with like the shooting victims and the bombing victims is their immune system goes in the toilet within about a year or so. And they start getting really super sick. They get sick 2 or 3 times a year, where before they might not get sick at all, or they get kind of sick, they start getting sick all the time, and they have a hard time maintaining their finances and functioning, right? And so part of what happens is they're not hitting this particular state, right? And so one of the things that we look at is we use the ginger to help push them into that anabolic state so that their immune system actually starts to function again. You're basically wanting to stimulate certain processes. And to take it a step further for the PTSD patients, we actually go through and we do this 4-step process to stimulate a certain part of your immune system that is for fighting off viruses and bacteria. And you know, your immune system gets divided up into these different segments or sections, right? And so there's one section that is just about fighting off viruses, bacteria, the growth of fungus in your body, and fighting off cancer cells, right? And what happens is when that system is compromised, that is actually another system that produces anxiety when it's compromised. When that system is strong, actually the person relaxes. Even though you're using oils that are very stimulating to that process, they're hot, they're stimulating, they're like forms of thyme and cinnamon. You know, you're using things that are very stimulating. when you're done, the person goes, I feel really relaxed, because their body doesn't have to keep their guard up. They don't have to be hypervigilant. You're being hypervigilant because your body is compromised, so that produces anxiety, right? Your body knows there's a compromise here. I have to stay hypervigilant to protect myself. And so the same idea is happening with this anabolic state. When you're not hitting this anabolic state, certain parts of your body are staying hypervigilant because there is some sort of compromise. And so what's happening is when you're sleeping, even though you're sleeping, you're still not hitting a deep enough level of sleep in certain areas where you're hitting that anabolic state. So one of the ways that you go through and you break that cycle for anything to do with the endocrine system or the immune system is you push them into an anabolic state while they're sleeping. And so ginger is a very easy way to do it. Just long, slow, deep breaths, like 15 to 20 long, slow, deep breaths every night before you go to bed. Now, if you wanted to enhance it, you could take a drop or two of Moroccan thyme. It has to be Moroccan. The other types of thyme wouldn't work, and in fact would probably make the situation worse. But Moroccan thyme actually regulates the thymus, and the thymus is partially what will control the immune system from attacking the body. And so it basically calms down anything autoimmune. And so usually I start them off with a little bit of ginger at nighttime, right before they go to bed. If you don't have ginger, you could also use cedar. Cedar would work. And just long, slow, deep breaths. 15, 20, if you could do more, great. But if you do that on a regular basis, usually within 30 days, you'll start to notice a difference. Usually at 30 days, a substantial difference. Yeah, yes.
I have a question about anxiety and sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a 10-year-old daughter who, she does okay sleeping, but she has generalized anxiety in the evenings, and it always manifests as GI upset. Obviously, I mean, I'm a nurse, it's not GI. But she doesn't, nothing's wrong with her stomach.
Is she a perfectionist?
No, not at all. I have one of those too.
Okay.
She's raised and gone. But anyway,
Yeah.
and so what would be two parts? What would be the best oils to help treat her, to treat that, and what would be the best way to administer it? She's a smart kid, but she's only 10. What would be the best way?
Is she having social anxiety at all?
No, it's about an ex. It's her dad.
Okay.
Isn't everything about an
Okay.
ex?
Yeah,
Just teasing. I'm teasing.
No,
But she
that's
whenever
very
she talks to
valid.
him on the phone, it makes her very upset. He doesn't live here. And it causes these, and then she's like, my stomach hurts. Can I have a Tums? Of course, the worst thing in the world. No.
I would actually use the marjoram on her.
Okay. And then what would be the best way? Because I don't want her to
Inhaler.
think. Inhaler?
Yeah, like,
Okay.
put it in, have her inhale it for long periods of time,
Okay.
or take several drops and put on a little bit of lotion and rub it on her chest.
Oh, okay.
Because it kind of has a little bit of a eucalyptus-y kind of smell, and just say it's to help you sleep better.
Okay.
You don't have to tell her it's, because this is one of the
Because
tricks.
your dad's a jerk. Am
Yeah,
I
yeah.
supposed to say that? No,
Right.
I'm teasing.
You said it on Facebook to the whole world.
I should not say that.
But like,
I do lavender.
yeah,
I do
lavender would work, but
I just don't know. She just
she's-
has so, and it's always right after she talks to her on the phone, and then she's not
Yeah.
sleeping, and
part of
feel
it
so bad
is
for her.
she's also grieving that process.
It-
That
Absolutely.
overstimulation again.
And
right?
so I would say help her grieve that situation. And so
but to her not to be able to almost at that age having to be able to voice it is hard. But she knows her stomach's upset. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's
Yeah.
interesting how it manifests.
and the thing too, that's the thing that's really nice about oils is she doesn't have to voice it. She
Exactly.
doesn't have to relive it. She doesn't have to figure it out. It shifts the nervous system and the emotional body enough
Okay.
to where she'll just go at some point. That's what you're looking for. Is
Yeah.
she could almost just like care less,
Yeah.
or she'll go, "Dad's a jerk."
Yeah.
That's actually what you're looking for. Is she stops needing the
Just not
the
internalizing
attention.
what's
Right,
going on
exactly.
with him. Yeah.
And so that's one
Okay.
one trick. Now, is she prone to depression at all?
Not that I'm
Okay.
aware of. Yeah.
And is she real sensitive with him? Like if he says something, does she?
Like he'll talk about money, and then she'll talk about money for a week, and we don't even talk about money in our house. Like it really upsets her, something like that. So if a subject comes up, that'll that makes her really sensitive. But I can talk to her
Is
about
she
it.
introverted at all?
No, she's like me.
She's extroverted.
She's pretty extroverted. But she holds her cards super close to her chest. Like she's very German that way. You know what I mean? She's not showing a lot of emotion.
Yeah, I would say normally like a kid that age, but like you said, normally I would probably give them cinnamon, but I don't know that that's it. Cinnamon would make the person thick-skinned and a little bit more outgoing, but I don't think that's her
No,
issue.
she's pretty.
And so.
And I don't necessarily want to solve all the problems because that's just life is going through these
Honestly,
things. I get it, but it's like I just want her to be able
I
to
think
rest.
she just needs to be able to grieve that
Yeah.
situation with
Okay.
her dad. And so here's the trick. Like when you're treating somebody, that's also the thing with oils is they don't have to know why. You know what I mean? Like, so in the corporate setting, I use a lot of hyssop and root because it's very good for conflict resolution. It just calms everybody down, calms down fight flight kind of stuff. And so you go in that setting and they walk in and there's a boardroom or something and they'll go, what is that smell? And you go, it's good for colds and flus, and they'll go every time.
Yeah.
So you tell them it's either good for colds and flus, or you tell them it's for stress, and they'll inhale every time. And so you don't have to tell them why. Or the other trick is with family is you just put some on your wrist, and then you rub it there, and then when they're interacting with you, they have to smell it.
Right.
Because they're interacting with you.
She's
So
used to the oils and all
but
sorts
like
of other stuff I
say
do,
you're
so.
dealing with Bob at Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Bob is
You
such a
can't dunk
jerk.
him in oil.
Yeah.
You just
So you put it on, and you just, when he's interacting with you, it's a way to.
We're just pouring on
calm
Bob.
down. Yeah.
So the marjoram is what you suggest.
For her.
Okay.
Because like you could use geranium as well, but I think marjoram would actually be a little bit better because the issue is she's her perception of her dad, of her family has changed, and she's just not,
Yeah.
and as much as she intellectually understands it, part of what happens is, we could go at this a little bit deeper if you want.
No,
I'm
either way.
okay.
I want
So
anyone else to ask the questions too.
here's the issue: is if you look at like how people process something, on one of the early levels, the first stage is you're dealing with pain, right? Then the next phase is you're dealing with the emotional component. So a lot of times what happens when you're trying to deal with something emotional, there's something out here and then there's you, and you're trying to wrestle with this thing, right? The more that you can get this here, the easier it becomes because it becomes part of you. It's not something that you're disconnected from, right?
So like the idea of embrace this up. You just
Right.
embrace the
So
whatever it
marjoram is actually going to help move you
Move it in.
to here. Now, the next phase would be you could use any of the grasses like ginger grass, camel grass, bluegrass. Lemongrass actually works more like the marjoram would.
Okay.
But those three grasses would work really well, and then vetiver might, but definitely those three would work really well. But the next phase is you're wanting to stimulate the visual cortex. And the reason why you're wanting to stimulate the visual cortex is, you kind of said it in what you were saying there is, she intellectually understands it, then she has a conversation with him, and she gets emotionally wound up, and then she's talking about something for a while. And so what happens is, until we're able to perceive something, either visually perceive something or we see it in our head, we come at it from an emotional point of view, right? And so by stimulating the visual cortex, you can get a new idea into the brain or into the mental body where they're actually able to get in that new piece of information. When you're coming at it from that emotional point of view, if you think about it, like how many times have you talked out with somebody the reasons why something happens, and then they go back to all the emotional things but there's this, but there's that, and they grind on all these emotional issues and these emotional reactions. It's because they haven't been able to perceive what's being said yet, right? And so the different grasses actually stimulate the visual cortex. And so you either are able to visually see it, or you're actually able to see the idea in your head that now the brain is able to lock onto that piece of information to find it and go, I can stick this on the shelf. So esoterically, this is the thing with Thomas saying this to Christ, where he's like, teacher, I need to see the wounds. I need to see the wounds. Otherwise, this isn't real to me, right? It's not that he is a doubter, it's that we're all wired that way. We are all wired that if we don't visually perceive something, or if we don't perceive it in our head, it is not real to our brain. We have to be able to see it. And so if you know this, you have to stimulate the visual cortex when you're getting in a new idea. And once that visual cortex is stimulated, then she can go, you know what? Dad's a jerk. But until then, she's going to keep running that emotional hamster wheel, trying to get the approval until she realizes, he's always doing this, he's always doing this, he's always doing this, right? And so the next phase of therapy is to stimulate the visual cortex as she's seeing, like, wow, he does this every time. It's like, now smell this.
Yeah.
As she's processing it, and then pretty soon she's like, you know what? Every time he's doing this, every time he says he's going to show up, he doesn't. Every time this is going on, he plays my emotions against me. Like every time she'll start seeing the pattern, and then she'll recognize it for what it is.
I mean, anybody could do that, really.
Right. So even in therapy, that's what you're trying to do. You try to get it into the heart first, and then the next phase is, then you're trying to stimulate the visual cortex. Then from there, you're trying to stimulate the abstract mind, which is not the part of the mind that's grinding on details, but the part of the mind that now starts to see patterns, right? And that's the part of the mind that makes decisions. That's the part of the mind that adjusts and adapts. It takes in new information or abstract information and applies it. And so if you look at the structure of what's happening, she's just stuck in the emotional, which is pretty normal.
For 10. Yeah.
For anybody.
Yeah.
Like she could be
For 45.
30, yeah. And that's a normal place to get
Okay.
stuck, right? It's usually, if you can get them from there to the next one, a lot of times the other ones unwind.
Okay.
But it's that one is where they'll get stuck.
That's super helpful, thank you.
Yeah. And the thing is, that I think it's in the hypothalamus, but it's, the more painful it becomes, the more that they'll try to do things to get the person to like them until they break out of that phase, because they're trying to manage their pain, right? So it is a therapeutic thing to break them out of that cycle. That's why captors fall in love with their, like, the
Stockholm
person.
syndrome.
Right. It's because they're trying to manage the pain, and if they have these positive feelings for the person might not hurt them, or it changes, they're not a threat anymore, or you know what I mean? So that is actually an endocrine issue. It's an endocrine way that your body tries to handle a threat, and until you break out of it, it's going to stay in that emotional component. So the sooner you break her out of that, the more she sees it for what it is. Because you also don't want it to turn into a pattern for her that's the guy she dates when she's, in another 10 years or something. You know what I mean?
20, yeah.
Yeah. Not saying,
Yeah.
not saying that he's a jerk, but
So it kind of breaks them out of
since
that.
he's not here, so we'll say he's a
He's very
jerk.
far away.
So that would kind of help break them out of that self-sabotage
Yeah,
cycle.
breaks
That
them out of the
makes
self-sabotage. Because if you think about what is self-sabotage, self-sabotage is usually not creating a pattern. It's that you see a pattern and you don't pump the brakes.
Right.
Like you see it happening and you go, yeah, this is about to happen. I'm gonna let it happen anyway. Like you just don't hit stop. right? It's not that you go through and you create all these things. You see something happening and you just don't stop it. You just go, yeah, this is what always happens, and you just never pump the brakes. So the ability to stop self-sabotage is being able to pump the brakes and go, this isn't happening anymore. I'm putting a stop to it right now. Yeah. No, I think that's a good question. I mean, that's tied to psychology, but even in the esoteric circles, it's tied to how you even process like if you were to look at the alchemical process of accepting Christ into the heart, that is a 7-step process that is the same mechanisms. You know, you look at pain first, and then you emotionally integrate it, and then you have to see it, and then you start looking at it from the abstract point of view. You know, you kind of walk it through these steps. If you look at Buddhism, there's these things called the Four Noble Truths. The very first noble truth is, in life there is suffering. They start off the same way. Very first thing you're dealing with is pain. Then what is causing my pain, which is the emotional component. And then, you know, what do I do about my pain? And then you put something in action. So it's a different way of saying the same thing. And so every tradition tries to deal with this in different ways, but the mechanisms are the mechanisms. And so if you know that's her mechanism, you can break her out of it a whole bunch of different ways. The oil way is to use the grasses, but until she is able to get it into the heart, she can't do the next phase. Marjoram will get her to getting it in the heart.
And when you review those other 3 grasses you said?
Ginger grass, bluegrass, and camel grass.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think it's just because that's what camels, they come from the Middle East, it's what the camels do. So, did you guys enjoy tonight?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much.
So we're gonna try to